Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the March 17th meeting of the Revenue Subcommittee. We still have some members trickling in, so we're going to start with some uncontroversial bills just to start clearing them out of the way. By the way, happy St. Patty's Day, happy Holi, happy Purim. I hope everyone got their Hamantaschen and is enjoying them because they're delicious. Let's start with HB 252. So we had previously moved this bill out of subcommittee with an amendment, and the bill was unanimous coming out of subcommittee. We had added an amendment that would have created a delay in the local income tax bracketing. Since then, there have been a series of conversations between the Comptroller's Office and a number of the counties and MACO and myself, and the Comptroller's Office has come to the conclusion they don't need the delay that's in the bill, that they can work things out administratively. So I'd like to move to strip that delay amendment off the bill so we can get the underlying bill moving.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, on the bill as amended, Delegate Pelakovich-Carr, you want to make a motion?
Move favorable on the bill as amended.
Second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. House Bill 775 is the Maryland, creates a Maryland Pediatric Cancer Fund. It establishes the fund. We are secondary on this bill. The reason we're secondary is it does create an income tax checkoff to help fund the fund. So this is the Chair of Appropriations bill. I will let the members know there's a little bit of disagreement between the House and the Senate on this one. The Senate doesn't want to add the income tax checkoff, and instead they found some money in the budget. But I told the chair we'd go ahead and move it so that they could figure out whatever they need to figure out. So, George, are there any amendments? No? Okay.
No amendments.
So I move the bill.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? HB.
Mr. Chairman, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I have to go to a local revenues meeting. Is it possible to take up my bill first?
Yeah,
is that okay?
854?
That's 854, yes.
Yeah, that was the next one I was going to go to. So.
Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're all good. So HB 854, again, we are secondary on it. It's a bill that ECM moved out that sort of reshuffles how we do the Maryland-made beer and wine promotion fund. So I haven't heard any concerns about it. Stan, there's an amendment on the bill that ECM added, right?
Yeah, so the amendment adds a representative of the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission to the Advisory Commission, clarifies the not-for-profit entities that could receive grants, prohibits lobbying activities, grants for lobbying activities, and requires the annual report be given to the committees of jurisdiction.
So I move the amendments.
Second.
Any discussion on the amendments? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I move the bill as amended.
Second.
Any discussion on the bill as amended? Everybody likes Maryland-made beer, right? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that bill passes. Thank you, Stan. Have fun in local revs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Let's see what else is relatively non-controversial. So HB 158, we finally got approval for the $500,000 mandated appropriation, which is in the amendments that were sent around. All of the other amendments on the bill are exactly the same as we discussed earlier in session, but this would ensure that the program actually has a fund, some money that they can use to get started.
Is this the bill? I don't remember, quite frankly, if we ever reached a resolution. You know, we had some questions about the administrative costs of the program kind of consuming some of the mandated appropriation. I don't.
Yeah.
How did that get addressed?
So in the amendments that we had previously adopted, and we'll re-adopt them here because they now include the mandated appropriation, there's a limit set that no more than 10% of the appropriation can be used for administrative overhead.
Okay.
And it's still, these amendments still split the control of the program between the two agencies that are best equipped to handle it and all the other stuff we had discussed before. Move the amendments.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion on the amendments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, on the bill as amended, is there a motion?
Move favorable.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Got one opposed. Okay. So that bill moves out of subcommittee. All right, so I'll go back to going in numerical order now that we've got most of the subcommittee here. Let's go back to HB 27. So House Bill 27, as introduced, pertains to the historic revitalization tax credit. The bill essentially does two things. It creates for the first time consistent funding for the small commercial credit. It also gradually increases the overall or the large commercial credit closer to levels that it was historically at. There are sort of two parts of amendments to this, and I'd like to take them in two separate pieces, although George may have sent them out as part of the same amendment, but I think they're separate votes, so I want to make sure people have the ability to vote on them separately. The first part of it simply changes some of the numbers of the bill. In essence, in discussions with our budget folks, we ended up having about $10 million to spend on this. So the first set of amendments rejigger the numbers a little bit. They would set the small commercial funding at $2 million annually, and then in two steps of $4 million each, increase the large commercial fund. As a result of that, at the end of the period in the bill, the large commercial fund would have grown from 12 million, which is what we passed last year and will be in effect this next fiscal year, to 20 million at the end of it. So I move that amendment to adjust the numbers.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. The second part of the amendments actually has to do with the enterprise zone. And this is a vehicle situation where this is the convenient vehicle that was identified for doing this. But an issue's arisen as a result of the pandemic where properties that had qualified for enterprise zone exemptions in the years of the pandemic were not able to utilize them because of pandemic-related issues. And so what the language in the amendment does, it essentially extends their period, the period for which they qualify for the enterprise zone incentives, so that they get to use the full length of the enterprise zone incentives now that the pandemic is coming to an end. It's the reason this is coming a little late is because we've been gaming out the numbers on it. It's a relatively small amount in any given year. Over the course of the entire extension, it would be about, I think, a $44 million hit to the state and equal numbers to the counties. But the idea is to give these property owners that, did their due diligence and qualified under an existing state incentive program, but couldn't really utilize it because of the pandemic, time to actually utilize it.
Is it only for new people, like people who just got qualified during year one or year two, or is it, the year 1 and 2 was 2020, 2021, or was it people who were already in the pipeline, they were already getting their yearly benefit and they just stalled out because of the pandemic?
George.
Becoming newly eligible for the credit in calendar years 19, 20, and 21. If you were already in the pipeline before then, that the credit amounts are not changed.
What's the rationale for that? Just because it would be more of a fiscal impact to include to give everybody like a 2-year extension, essentially?
Yeah, this is, I mean, otherwise the fiscal impact would have become unmanageable. So.
And it's the enterprise zone credit, so it's only commercial properties tied towards job creation and other things.
George is not.
George is nodding imperceptibly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't know if this is a question for George or if my question is about better understanding how or why these projects were not able to utilize or take advantage of or benefit from the credit during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think the issue is in part, you have, for example, a new commercial building that comes online that's qualified for the project, but you don't have tenants necessarily, or you're not able to get new tenants because no one's working in person, no one's, in the building, right? So I think that's the argument behind it. Delegate Feldmark, you look like you're.
So I'm not. I mean, I'm not sure that. I mean, this is a property tax credit, correct?
Right.
And so because the property is assessed based on its profitability, and they weren't making any money because of a lack of tenants, they were valued lower. It seems like then they weren't paying taxes anyway. I'm missing a piece maybe. I mean, if they're assessed lower because of the impact of the pandemic, then they already got that relief.
They didn't see
lower
an
assessment.
increase in their assessment,
I'm sorry?
potentially. If they did not see an increase in the assessment potentially, then there's no credit to receive. They're still potentially paying taxes in the meantime, but they're not getting any of the credit as a result of the increased lack of an increased assessment. So this effectively provides a bridge in light of the pandemic period in order to allow them to fully benefit from the credit.
Well then, and I'm sorry that Delegate Buckle isn't here at his computer to hear this, but then I think I might agree with his concern about why this only matters in the first few years of the credit instead of at any point in the credit.
I mean, I think the argument in response to that would be that, arguably folks that existed prior were able to get some benefit of the incentive and establish themselves better, right? Create sort of firm footing for their business or property or whatever it is.
And I'm sorry if I can do one more question. I won't promise it's my last, but it's my last for right now. And now Delegate Buckle's back right after I finished agreeing.
No, he left us again.
I had to, I was summoned by the chairwoman of our committee to send her something via email that I promised her on the floor I would send her. So I had to go to my aide what I wanted sent. Sorry about that.
But so then my other question right now is, if I'm reading this correctly, a business gets the full 3-year extension in the credit, whether they initially qualified in the first year of the pandemic or the last year of the pandemic. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so even if they only suffered sort of 1 year of that period of impact, they'd still get the 3 years of extension.
That's correct.
Okay.
Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Delegate Feldmark, I don't begrudge you your multiple bites at the apple. They are good questions. And I'm going to continue on that line of questioning. So with the enterprise zone program, the point is to bring redevelopment to economically distressed areas. So the gamble that any business or that any developer is taking when they are participating in this program is they're coming into an area that is objectively economically depressed, and they're taking the gamble that that area is going to turn around. And basically, isn't the program supposed to be protecting them against those increased assessments because the area has turned around and therefore the property assessments are going up? So, I guess setting aside this issue about the pandemic, that's the risk that any participant in this program is taking regardless in any year. If there's a market downturn or just the area isn't seeing the economic recovery that was hoped for, like they similarly do not see any increase in their assessment and therefore on paper are not getting any benefit from the property tax credit. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that, I mean, I don't think you can set aside the pandemic, right? It's outside the normal business cycle, you know, once every century event, so.
Fair. So then I guess I would ask the question of why is 2019 included? The pandemic hadn't started in 2019. What's the rationale for that year? Respectfully.
Those were the years that were selected.
A question for George, if I may. I was having a little trouble from reading the amendment. Is this just for focus areas or this is all enterprise zones and what's in the amendment?
All enterprise.
All
It's not
enterprise.
limited to focus.
And so we did hear earlier from the chair about what the overall cost was. Do we know how many properties are impacted?
I do not know offhand. I'll see if I can find that.
While he's doing that, further questions or discussion on the amendment?
I mean, I'm okay with it. I guess I have a little bit of a different thing of, you know, people that were already in the pipeline and might have suffered the same inability to claim or to have sort of some of the benefits of the program because of their businesses shut down won't be included. But I understand I understand the rationale. At some point in time, you have to pick, you know, a cutoff and a plan. And I think it probably does make more sense to start with people who qualified for the program, were beginning the program, and then didn't get really any potential benefit from it, and will lose, you know, those early years. Doesn't it work? Some of the credits work so that in the earlier years you get a higher percentage, right?
Yeah, and then it scales down over time.
Right. So to come in and say, hey, I got this higher percentage, but I couldn't really qualify at all, so I have to basically reset myself in the middle of the scale. That's a rational compromise to me.
In response to the question about how many properties, over 100 properties would benefit.
Delegate Feldmark?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess what concerns me about this is it undercuts in some way the argument that that this tax credit is an incentive, right? That because it's the investment that was going to be made has already been made, right? And yes, maybe they're not seeing the full benefit of it, but that's because they're also not seeing the increased property tax assessment that was expected. So I guess by doing this retroactively, I'm not sure, unless we're just saying it's general pandemic relief. And if it's general pandemic relief, it feels inappropriately targeted, right? So I'm a little uneasy with it.
Okay. Delegate Palakovich-Carr?
Thank you. I'm struggling to do my virtual raise hand. I would completely agree with what Delegate Feldmark just said. I have a lot of concerns about this.
Okay. Seeing no further hands, I'll move the amendment.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I think we've already had discussion. Anyone want to say something more? Okay, I'm gonna do a roll call, just even though this isn't recorded, just so we can get it all straight. Delegate Palakovich-Carr?
No.
Delegate Feldmark?
No.
Delegate Buckle?
Yes.
Delegate Long? You're muted, Bob. Yes. Delegate Charles? You're muted. I can't hear you.
Yes.
And I vote yes. So the amendment's adopted. On the bill as amended, move favorable.
Second.
second,
Delegate Palovich-Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was a big fan of the original bill and even with the first set of amendments that we adopted today. I think I'm voting against the bill in light of the second amendment that we adopted. I'm sorry.
Totally understand. All right. All those in favor of the bill as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
aye,
Any opposed? All right. The bill moves forward to committee. HB 478, Economic Development Enterprise Zone Program Alterations. So there's a set of amendments being offered on this that scale the bill back a little bit. And first of all, let me say the Enterprise Zone Program is a complex program. I personally think it's in need of serious reform. And frankly, beyond what will result if we adopt these amendments and even beyond what was introduced in the bill. I have yet to see any trustworthy empirical evidence that this program even works. But, you know, it is a program that's popular with the counties nonetheless. And so, you know, I think if we can consider these amendments, consider the amended version of the bill, which will be scaled back a little bit as a step in the right direction. But I'll tell members of the subcommittee, you know, I'm sure Delegate Palovich-Carr and I too am interested in us looking closely at this program in future years, because we do want to be spending taxpayer money in ways that actually gets results. So I'm going to turn to George to describe what the amendments do to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The short version is that the amendments would strike provisions of the bill that alter the authority of the Secretary of Commerce to designate enterprise zones and focus areas under the enterprise zone program. In particular, the amendments strike limitations with respect to overall program cap, as well as altering the designations to have been based on census tracts rather than current methods. In addition, the amendments also strike provisions that would have limited the amounts of the income and property tax credits that may be claimed under the program.
And then, George, can you describe, if the amendments were adopted, what would remain in the bill?
If adopted, as what would remain are first, a declaration or explanation of the purpose for the program, instructions for the department to adopt regs governing the evaluation and prioritization of applications for the designation of new zones and the expansion of existing zones. Would also limit expansions from 50% currently to 25%, but would authorize the secretary to grant an extraordinary expansion of an enterprise zone in the state each calendar year for an area that would merit inclusion in an enterprise zone for a compelling economic reason. In addition, the bill alters certain reporting requirements and duties. Those are the changes that are reflected on page 7 through 9 of your reprint. In addition, it would continue to sunset the program, but I would note that the sunset is contingent to the grandfathering language that is currently in statute under 5-707 D2. In addition, the amendment or the bill would require qualified employees to be paid at least 120% of the state minimum wage rather than 150% of the federal minimum wage.
So just a couple of questions, George, whomever to understand that better. It removes the language that was in the bill that had something to do with census tracts and the expansion of the zones related to census tracts, because
That's correct.
Okay. And it removes I think it was 60 million. I don't have all my notes in front of me.
That is correct.
It removes the cap. provides for the sunset, but when you said contingent upon grandfathering, can I interpret that to mean that if you're in the program before the 2030 sunset happens, if it's allowed to sunset, then you still get the full benefits of the program, whatever, I think it's over 10 years or
So
whatever.
the existing statute provides that a law that's enacted after the enactment of 5-707 that eliminates or reduces benefits available to a business entity does not apply to a business entity that was in an enterprise zone before the effective date of the law. So
Okay.
that should provide some grandfathering protection.
So if a property, a business or whatever it is gets in the program in 2029 and the legislature in 2030, and you know, from my lips to God's ears, I hope I'm not here. If they say, hey, we're going to terminate the program, then technically the program would still have a 8 or 9 or 10 year zombie life, so to speak, for those businesses. Is that fair?
I believe that clause should provide that protection.
And then 120% of the state, I'm okay with that. I have an issue. I know Delegate Philmark knows that when we talk about putting 150% and those kind of numbers, because it starts eliminating areas of the state that need these programs the best or the most, and they have a hard time competing with neighboring states and getting to that, 150%. But if it's 120, that's $18 an hour. And you can't pay anybody less than $15 an hour in a couple of years in Maryland anyway. So I'm good with that. Explain to me a little bit. You said a section about you could only increase the zone under the current law. Is it you could increase the zone by up to 50%, but now the secretary can only do it by 25%. But there's some provision that the secretary could increase it one time a year for one project based on certain factors. Can you delve into that a little more?
Sure. So on page 4 of your reprint, currently there's an expansion that's authorized. Expansion of zones is authorized, but it's limited to 50% of the existing geographic area of the enterprise. Right. And that would not count towards the limit on the number of enterprise zones.
It's not a brand new
secretary
zone.
can
Right.
authorize in a
It's just
given year.
I get that. Okay.
And this would limit it to 25% rather than 50%. If you go above 25%, then you can still expand, but it would count towards the overall
Zone
limitation on the number of zones that can be designated. And then it expands the grounds that the secretary can grant an extraordinary expansion. And that's on page 5 of your reprint, page 5 of the bill.
Okay. Line 6, 7. That's what I'm looking at.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I see Delegate Charles, and then I'll go to Ms. Lahat from the Department of Commerce.
Okay. Yeah, quick question. How many people are typically within a census tract? Because I was looking at the bill and it's like 1,500. That seems to be the go-to number in the bill. How many people normally are in those tracts? I'm just trying to make sure that folks in Prince George's County, we don't get beat up because with the federal enterprise zones, a lot of our community was left out of the enterprise zones.
Census tracts generally have population sizes that vary between 1,200 individuals and 8,000 individuals, with optimum size of 4,000. And that's from the information provided on the Census Bureau's website.
Delegate Pelagovich-Carr.
If I can just add, Delegate Charles, so that language though, with this amendment that was before us, that language from the bill is stripped out about the population size and census tracts.
Thank you.
Ms. Lahat.
Thank you, Delegate. I just wanted to circle back quickly on Delegate Buckles' question about the sunset. I'm a little concerned, given the language that's in existing law, that in the example that he gave where a business moves in, like in 2029, they would be impacted because it states that it does not apply to a business entity that was in an enterprise zone before the effective date of the law. So I would want to confirm with our AGs if they would be able to, like if the program were to sunset in 2030, if a business moved in 2029, I'm not sure if they would be able to then take full advantage of the program for longer than a year, but I would have to confirm that.
George, do you have a read on that?
I think that issue raised is, maybe valid. So I can look into that more clearly to see if we need to have a stronger grandfathering clause. Looking at that particular section, since it's the law enacted after enactment doesn't impact, then as Ms. Lahat states, the sunset would already be on the books. So there may not be as much protection afforded there. Like if you're anybody that's currently receiving a benefit, I don't think that would. I think that clause provides some protection.
I mean, can we do it? It's up to you, Mr. Chairman. Can we do it as a conceptual amendment or the conceptual language that strengthens that? And then I can vote for the bill. I think it's a compromise. I know we don't have the time to get the language done right now, but if we could do it conceptually before it gets to full committee.
Are people comfortable with that, doing that portion conceptually? I mean, full committee is not voting today anyway, right?
Right. Not voting until tomorrow. That's why I thought maybe George or someone from Commerce could put that together. And then we don't have to come back and talk about it again.
Well, I mean, we're going to have another subcommittee meeting tomorrow anyway, because we've got this, this weird vehicle excise tax bill that somebody asked me to move. So
It's a really good bill. Sarah Elfer thinks so.
well, what's the will of the subcommittee? Delegate Feldmark?
Can I just clarify? So, I mean, I'm okay with discussing things conceptually. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same concept. So I think Delegate Buckle, what you'd like to see is any project that qualifies before the sunset date can enjoy the full 10 years of the tax credit. Is that?
Yeah, and I don't
basically
know if I'm using the right words. Jen probably is more, qualifies or is enrolled or has been granted into the. I mean, I don't want somebody to just say, "Hey, I applied and I qualify." I want someone that the secretary has actually said, "Hey, you're going to get whatever the legalistic language needs to be. You're
Right.
in the program." Because otherwise, if people come in 2026, 2028, they're like, "What's the point of me applying for this program if I know it may go away in a couple of years?" That way, they'll know even if the program does go away.
They still have their 10
They're in for
years.
the life of what the law was. Yeah.
And the only other thing I'd like to point to is under 707D1, where it indicates that the incentives and initiatives are available for 10 years after the date that the area is designated an enterprise zone. I'd want to see how that all of D is referenced with the current sunset language. So I'll work with the department to see what the appropriate clarifying language would be.
Delegate Palakovich-Carr?
My preference would be, if we're meeting again tomorrow, would be just to hold off and actually see the language of the amendment before we adopt that and move the bill.
Okay. We will special order this bill until our meeting tomorrow. Let's move to HB 641. House Bill 641 establishes an income tax theatrical production tax credit for musicals and such.
Sounds like a Julian Ivey bill.
Yeah, he wasn't the sponsor though. So the amendments
better sponsor.
The amendments to the bill would reduce the program from $10 million as proposed in the bill as originally introduced to 5 and set a 5-year sunset on the program. George, is there anything else in the amendments I missed?
What's the film tax? 12.5, something like that?
Something like that. But the film tax credit is now appropriated. It's not set in statute. So
I think that I believe it's 12. I'll confirm.
yeah, Jen's nodding. So yeah, it's 12.
It's a cap though. It's not appropriated. It's cap.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We moved away from having a fund as the
Gotcha.
basis for that. And instead, there was
Okay.
just a set limit.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. I move the amendments.
Second.
All in favor of the amendments, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? On the bill as amended, is there a motion? Anyone want to get in good with the sponsor of the bill?
Oh, you want to take add-ons?
No, I was seeing who wanted to make the motion.
Favorable.
Second.
All those in
Blakovich
favor-
Carr's trying hard.
all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that bill is recommended to the committee. And finally, HB 1444, as introduced, would remove completely the sunset on the income tax credit for the endowments of Maryland HBCUs. I know there was some discussion in the bill hearing about, removing it completely versus extending it. I feel strongly personally that we should be using sunsets, right? And that means on everything, even things we really like. And I love this credit. I think this is great. So I have an amendment to offer, which instead of entirely repealing the sunset, would just extend it by 5 more years. And of course, as you know, the idea is that we're able to periodically reevaluate the effectiveness of these programs. But happy to hear other perspectives. But I move that amendment.
Second.
Is there discussion of the amendment? Delegate Feldmark.
I guess I agree with the premise that everything should have a sunset. I guess I guess I'm wondering if 5 years, if a 5-year extension is really if we should be doing more, right? And if you feel like 5 years is sort of the appropriate measure, but I think we just did a tax credit with sunset in 2030 , right? So we just talked about a tax credit.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just wondering why this would have a shorter sunset than that.
Sure. The only reason 5 million was picked is that the previous sunset on it was 4 years and 6 months. I don't know how they arrived at that, but I just rounded up to 5 years. So, I'm agnostic on the length of the sunset. We've done 7 years, we've done 5, we've done, I think, 10 in the past.
I guess, yeah. Look, if I'm perfectly happy to do 5, I think we should go for 10, but that's.
What's the whole purpose of the sunset for this?
So we've been adding sunsets to all the tax credit programs we've been doing as a way to allow the legislature to periodically reevaluate them. And sometimes that reevaluation could be this program's not working anymore. Sometimes that reevaluation could be this is how we make this program work more effectively. So that's the reason why.
We eliminated the tax credit evaluation committee, right? Because I remember serving on that a few years ago, and that was the whole purpose of this. We're going to eliminate it and use this committee and this subcommittee to actually do a lot of the evaluation because of the automatic sunsetting. There'll have to be bills every few years that deal with these things.
Right. So in a credit like this, for example, I personally, if I'm around whenever the sunset happens, I would never vote to eliminate this program. I think it's a great program, but the question for me a few years down the line is, can we get somebody to take a look at it and figure out, are there better ways to do it? Are there ways to make it stronger, more effective, more targeted, whatever it is?
Gotcha.
Whatever year you guys want to pick. I can vote for 7, 5, 10. It should be certainly at least 5.
Any other thoughts on the length of time?
Yeah, I think if 5 is a reasonable time, come back and look at it. I don't, because it may be, like you said, it may be something better. 5 years from now, maybe a better tax credit for dealing with this. So you can address it in 5 years versus waiting 10. I think it'll be easier to deal with that.
Okay. Everyone cool with that? All right. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? On the bill as amended, is there a motion?
Move favorable.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Who wants to defend a bill on the floor? I've
Which
got,
one?
yeah, well, I mean, take a look at the list of the bills we just did. 775 and 854 are another committee or other committees, so we won't have floor defense for those. But we've got 27, 158, 252, 641, and 1444. You guys want me to just assign bills and, okay.
It's fine.
Yeah, I'll text folks with suggestions and then go from there. If you have any particular preference, like a bill you'd really love to defend on the floor, then shoot me a text in the next hour or so.
You should make Julie and Ivy defend the theatrical production one in full Lion King costume. That's my vote.
I might just do that.
Yeah.
When do you prefer to meet tomorrow? I can schedule in the morning prior to our floor session. I could schedule between the sessions again. Do people have a preference?
Yeah, the morning is better. I have to pick my kids up from school tomorrow and then trek back out here. So
I can do morning. I mean, if you anticipate, is it only going to be the taking a look at that language we talked about on enterprise zone and the vehicle excise tax, or is there something else?
I mean, that's all I have on my list right now, but this close to crossover stuff could pop on. I
Yeah.
think it'll just be those two bills.
I mean, that should be pretty short. I would
Delegate
think.
Feldmark, you made a face.
So when in the morning are we talking?
7:30.
Floor is 10 tomorrow
Right.
or 11. What did we say?
Oh, I thought it was 10.
And I thought so too.
I mean, we should ask the guy who had to read it on the floor.
No, you read it for we're coming back
Because
today.
you read
at
it for
5.
tonight.
Yeah. I thought the chair said the other day that it was
10
floor
till-
at 10 Thursday and Friday.
So, I mean, I would say 9, but is that an issue, Delegate?
Are
Feldmark?
folks open to earlier? I mean, I have a 9 o'clock that I can try to reschedule if I need to, but that's
Too much earlier.
8:30?
8:30.
Earlier is actually better for me too. We have Latino caucus and I have to speak as vice chair of the Ledger Review Committee.
A lot of caucuses, delegation meetings, like right up to the end of the year, man. It's interesting.
All right. Why don't we
8:30.
why don't we say 8:30 right now? And if things change, I will make sure you all get an email and texts as well. So
Okay.
all
good to
right.
see everyone. That ends our meeting.